So, hello everyone. I'd like to welcome you to this Tradition Deep Dive hosted by the Contemplative Studies Centre at the University of Melbourne. I'm Dr. Cullen Joyce. I'm an Insight Fellow at the Centre. I'd just like to start with a brief acknowledgement of country. To acknowledge that I'm on the unceded land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders of the past and the present and those emerging. I'd like to pay my respects to any Aboriginal persons who are here today. Today, we are joined by Murray Ryden, a Zen Roshi with the Zen Group of Western Australia. In this workshop, Murray will demonstrate how Zen meditation practice can help us understand the interconnectedness of all life and take care of a planet in ecological crisis. Some of the session will be recorded today, so please, if you'd prefer not to be recorded, please keep your camera and microphone off. But the workshop has sections that are interactive, where you'll be sent out into breakout rooms. There'll be 1 or 2 whole group discussions. But so that you feel comfortable with talking, we will not record the breakout rooms or the group discussions that we'll be undertaking today. Just in general too, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to post comments in the chat throughout the session today. So I'd like to welcome you, Murray. Good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you, Cullen. Well, hello, everybody. It's good to be here, and I'd like to start off by acknowledging the elders, past, present, and emerging of the Gadigal country where I live. Gadigal country, of course, in what is now called Sydney. But I also teach I work with the Zen Group of Western Australia, so I'd also like to acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar elders too, because they are the people of the area where I teach Zen. So thank you. The 2 groups of elders where I live and where I practice. Yeah. Okay, so Cullen's already introduced me as a teacher with the Zen Group of Western Australia. In my past life, when I was working full-time, I worked with Aboriginal languages. That was my professional job. And so I have a long connection and interest in working with Indigenous people across Australia. But today, I'm going to be focusing on Zen, and it's really good to see you here. I can see some of you. Of course, I can't see everybody, but for those of you who are willing, especially as time goes on, it'd be lovely to see you and hear from you, because one of the characteristics of Zen practice, I mean, I think it's characteristic of all Buddhist practice, is that we value the Buddha, the enlightened being, as it were. We value the Dharma, the teachings of our practice, and we also value the Sangha, which is the other people we do it with. And so, you know, in the spirit of this being a Zen event, it'd be nice to involve as many of you as possible in what we're going to do here today. Today I'm going to talk about how we do Zen to start with. I mean, it's mainly about how we do it, so that you know what Zen is, as opposed to other Buddhist or non-Buddhist practices. So I'm going to show you some of the different practices that we do and invite you to join me in them, for those who've never experienced it, to get a taste of it. And some of this will be in breakout rooms. And so that's what we'll start off doing. And then later, I'll talk about why I find it important and helpful now at a time of environmental and ecological crisis. So just to start now, I'd really be interested if, and you know, if I can get a sort of sense. Oh, sorry, I've blacked out my. Yeah, I can see you again now. If people can sort of indicate either by sort of waving their hands or by using the chat, if you don't want to use your video, how many people have any experience with Zen? There's a few of you I can see. I'll just look at the next window and see who's over the page. Yeah. Okay. Well, there are quite a few Zennies in the group, but I hope you'll forgive me if we go over ground that you've covered in the past. Okay, so Zen is a Japanese word for Chan, which is the Chinese rendition of dhyana, which is the Sanskrit word for contemplation or meditation. So you can see the word itself has made a few changes over the centuries. Buddhist monks traveled from India to China, where it developed in a variety of ways. Bodhidharma was reputedly the person who first took dhyana, i.e. what became Chan and later Zen, to China. He had been heavily influenced by the Lankavatara Sutra, the sutra that was the most important sutra for Mahayana Buddhism at that time. Apparently, he gave that sutra to his Dharma heir, Huike, telling him that it contained all he needed to know about Zen. And the main emphasis through this unwieldy sutra is on attaining the inner enlightenment that thoroughly understands the illusory nature of all duality and distinctions in order to realize our own self-nature. In other words, in Zen, we're encouraged to do what the Buddha did rather than just do what he said. Red Pine, one of the translators of the Lankavatara Sutra, speaks of the difference between having a cup of tea in your hand and tasting the tea. In Zen, we want to taste the tea. In addition, Chan was also influenced by Taoism, a local Chinese earth-based folk religion. Two important elements of Taoist philosophy seems to have influenced Zen. First, the continuity between nature and human beings, or we could say the interbeing of the world and human society. And secondly, the rhythm of constant flux and transformation of everything that is the universe, and the return or reversion of all things to the Tao from which they emerged. Thus, Chan Buddhism has a unique flavor, which is particularly pertinent at a time when more than ever in human history, people have become disconnected from their interbeing with and dependence upon the earth, including its other life forms, the sun and moon, and other heavenly bodies we may not even have names for. Why this is so pertinent is probably worth exploring, but not here and not now. I'll just tell you a little bit about this particular practice, and I can't tell you that without saying how I started sitting regularly in Japan in 1976, when I found Yamada Roshi's dojo in Kamakura, where he taught in English for foreigners, as well as for local Japanese people. I tell you this because it explains why I practice in this particular Diamond Sangha Zen tradition. And in Kamakura in the 1970s, when I was there, I met Robert Aitkin before he was actually a Roshi, but soon after that, he was given full transmission as a Roshi and was able to teach by Yamada Roshi. I felt an affinity for Robert Aitkin, who was, as well as being a very serious Zen student at the time when I met him. He was also a political activist, having been a prisoner of war of the Japanese on Guam during the Second World War, and he was later taken from Guam to Japan, where he was a prisoner of war in Japan. And subsequently, when he returned to the United States and was already a Zen teacher and so on, he refused to pay that portion of his taxes that went to nuclear armament. So there was that history of, taking a stand on issues like nuclear war, weapons and things right at the beginning. So when I moved to Australia from the UK, as you've probably guessed, I wasn't born in Australia, but when I moved to Australia a couple of years after living in Japan, I found that the Sydney Zen Centre had just asked Aitkin Roshi to teach in Sydney. He had founded the Diamond Sangha in Hawaii and came regularly to teach in both Sydney and Perth. The Sydney Zen Centre and the Zen Group of Western Australia continue, and now there are other Diamond Sangha groups. I think some of you may be from the Melbourne Zen Group, which meets at Ceres, which I had the pleasure of visiting just a few weeks ago. And there are groups in Adelaide, Canberra, Darwin, Lismore, Castlemaine, and perhaps other groups across Australia now that I don't know about. And there are groups also elsewhere in the world, in North and South America and in Europe. The core of formal Zen practice is sitting meditation. The purpose of this is not to do what the Buddha said, but to realize what he realized, his Buddha nature, his awakened nature. After many years of spiritual practices, after a long night of sitting in meditation, he, Shakyamuni as he was then named, looked up and seeing the morning star, woke up to his true nature, to just this. Now Shakyamuni was a member of the Shakya clan at a time when small states and tribal clans were being subsumed into larger monarchies. During the Buddha's lifetime, the Shakya tribe was conquered and virtually eradicated by the kingdom of Kosala. This socio-political upheaval happened in many places in the world around the time, as agriculture had allowed the development of cities and all that implied, wealth especially. And it's no accident that the axial religions developed around this time. This is a whole topic in itself, the epoch when the Abrahamic religions, including Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, as well as Hinduism, Jainism, Zoroastrianism, Taoism, and Confucianism, emerged and developed. Basically, and this is a very sort of brief and simple account of it, there was a span of several centuries when, with a change from hunter-gatherers living in small groups who were always on the move, to agricultural societies, there was the development of towns and cities, employers and employees, rich and poor, and in many parts of the world. And the religious practices that developed then tended to serve the needs of these people rather than those still living tribally as hunter-gatherers. And it served them by having models of authority, rules of behavior, commandments and precepts, an emphasis on transcendence and a rewarding afterlife. Since for many at the lower rungs of these societies, their present life could be quite brutal. But, you know, once you had these vast discrepancies in power and status in society, it was some comfort, perhaps, to think that the next life would be better. Yeah. Buddhism has some similarities to Hinduism, but rejected caste and does not have a god or gods. So it's quite interesting to see that there was this huge change and the development of quite a different sort of religion with the huge change in society from mainly hunter-gatherer to more and more groups of agricultural communities, which subsequently developed into what we have today. So it's good to remember this, that religious practices tend to change according to the times and the politics, and what a time we are in now. So returning to the Buddha, which means awakened one, I mean, it's not a name, it's just meaning awakened. That's why we sit. That's why we do Zazen, which means sitting meditation. Zen is to sit. Zen is the meditation. Za is to sit. So sitting meditation in the same way that Shakyamuni did in order to attempt to awaken too. So today, I'd like to start by following the instructions of Dogen, the first and probably the most famous Japanese Zen teacher in the Soto lineage, which emphasizes shikantaza, just sitting, silent illumination, it's called in China. So I'm just going to share my screen with you now so that you can see this. Okay, so I'll just go to the next slide. Here we are. The Rules for Zazen by Eihei Dogen. He lived from 1200 to 1253. I'm going to read these two instructions to you because virtually nothing changed in these instructions. This is still exactly what one would learn in Japan today. And they are very good instructions. So, practicing Zen is Zazen. For Zazen, a quiet place is suitable. Lay out a thick mat. Do not let in drafts or smoke, rain, or dew. Protect and maintain the place where you settle your body. There are examples from the past of sitting on a diamond seat and sitting on a flat stone covered with a thick layer of grass. Day or night, the place of sitting should not be dark. It should be kept warm in winter and cool in summer. Set aside all involvements and let the myriad things rest. Zazen is not thinking of good, not thinking of bad. It is not conscious endeavor. It is not introspection. Do not desire to become a Buddha. Let sitting or lying down drop away. Be moderate in eating and drinking. Be mindful of the passing of time and engage yourself in Zazen as though saving your head from fire. On Mount Huangmei, the fifth ancestor practiced Zazen to the exclusion of all other activities. When sitting Zazen, wear the Kashaya. The Kashaya was a patched robe worn by monks. And I don't know if you can see the little thing of me, but when you see me again, I've got a thing around my neck, a little square thing like a bib. That's the sort of lay version of a Kashaya that all people wear who have taken the Buddhist vows. So when sitting, wear the Kashaya or the Rakasu and use a round cushion. The cushion should not be placed all the way under the legs, but only under the buttocks. In this way, the crossed legs rest on the mat and the backbone is supported with the round cushion. This is the method used by all Buddha ancestors for Zazen. Sit in either the half lotus position or in the full lotus position. I'm going to move the slide on now so you can see the half lotus position or in the full lotus position. For the full lotus position, put the right foot on the left thigh, the left foot on the right thigh. The toes should lie along the thighs, not extending beyond. For the half lotus position, simply put the left foot on the right thigh. Loosen your robes and arrange them in an orderly way. Place the right hand on the left foot and the left hand on the right hand, lightly touching the ends of the thumbs together. With the hands in this position, place them next to the body so that the joined thumb tips are at the navel. Straighten your body and sit erect. Do not lean to the left or right. Do not bend forward or backward. Your ears should be in line with your shoulders and your nose in line with your navel. Rest your tongue against the roof of your mouth and breathe through your nose. Lips and teeth should be closed. Eyes should be open, neither too wide nor too narrow. Having adjusted body and mind in this manner, take a breath and exhale fully. Sit solidly in samadhi and think not thinking. How do you think not thinking? Non-thinking. This is the heart of Zazen. Zazen is not learning to do concentration. It is the Dharma gate of great ease and joy. It is undefiled practice enlightenment. And this was written in the 11th month, first year of Kangen, 1243, that was taught to the assembly at Yoshimine Monastery, Yoshida County, Echizen Province. These instructions on sitting positions are only for those of you who are interested. And today we will sit together, but I invite you to sit either on a cushion on the floor, as I'm doing, or on a chair with your feet on the floor. In both cases, floor or chair, back should be both relaxed and straight, hands in the Zazen Mudra position. So I'm just going to move my camera down a bit so that you can see how I am sitting. I probably have to move back a wee bit, but you can see that I don't sit in full lotus or half lotus anymore. I'm sitting in what was the Burmese position with one foot in front of the other. And the way that you do the hand mudra, I'm going to put something here to hold my hand so you can see more clearly. You put your right hand resting on your lap, then your left hand on top of your right hand, and your two thumb tips just touching enough for you to be able to feel the electricity between the two thumbs, and rest them there. So even if you're sitting on a chair, it would be good to have your hands in this mudra so that you focus on keeping your thumb tips just touching each other. So to start today, we're just going to do what Dogen recommended. Once we are settled into our sitting positions, we are just going to do as he said and sit solidly in samadhi, which is the Sanskrit word for total collectedness. And what we're going to do is to think non-thinking. How do you do that? According to Dogen, non-thinking. So, what is thinking non-thinking? It is imagination expanding meditation, not thinking as we often do, driven by our own limited ideas, where we try to control the direction of our thinking, but just allowing thoughts to arise as they do, even thoughts that we don't like, and just let them go. We don't latch onto them, following a line of thought. We just let them come and then go, like clouds across the sky. So I'd like to invite you now to try this, either sitting on the floor if you want to move away from where your camera is, if it's not near you on the floor, or to sit on a chair. But if you're sitting on a chair, please be sure that you are not leaning back in the chair and that you have your feet firmly placed on the floor. And we're just going to do this for 5 minutes. I'm going to ring a bell 3 times to start, and then I'll ring it twice for us to end. So, okay, so if everybody's ready, I'll start now. Okay, so now we're going to sit with the breath. And so I'll ring the bell as before, but I'll lead you into this a little bit once I've rung the bell. Before we start focusing on the breath, I'd just like to invite you to be aware of your body and to be aware of whether it is relaxed. Be aware of any tension in your head, in your scalp, any tension in your face, your cheeks, your neck. In your shoulders, and just gradually move around your tension around your body, noticing if there is any tension anywhere. And if there is, just allow it to run like sand out of your body and into the ground. And when you have checked to let go of any tension, then bring your attention to awareness of breath. Notice the in-breath and notice the out-breath. Allow the breath to come in all the way down to below your belly button, to the hara. And then out. So keeping your body relaxed, just follow your breath. Keeping the focus of your breath on the lower part of your belly, letting that relax too. If you find your attention wandering, you might find it helps to count each out breath. 1, 2, and so on until you get to 10, and then start again at 1. Or if you lose count, if you go off on a little mind trip, when you come back, start again at 1. Okay, so I should just mention that however you were sitting for Zazen, please sit comfortably now. Um, normally when we are sitting, We sit for 25 minutes, or in some traditions, 40 minutes or 50 minutes at one time. And that will be followed by a period of walking meditation for 5 or 10 minutes, depending on how long we've been sitting for. And between 2 and 4 lots of sitting meditation would take place in an evening sitting, for example. At sesshin, which are retreats, which are ideally 7 days of sitting for many hours a day, from 4 or 5 in the morning until 9 o'clock or later in the evening. In the Soto tradition, during meditation, people traditionally do shikantaza, which is just sitting, as we did in the first round. In the Rinzai tradition, we use koans. The Diamond Sangha tradition, which I'm part of and which the Melbourne group is part of, is both Rinzai and Soto, so we do both. After initially sitting with a focus on the breath, people often want to start with one of the koans, known to be particularly effective in helping us to awaken to our true nature. If you don't know what a koan is, you may have heard the expression, the sound of one hand clapping. What is the sound of one hand clapping? Actually, that's a kind of misinterpreted version. It isn't what is the sound of one hand clapping, actually, it's what's the sound of one hand, which makes it much more understandable, doesn't it? But, you know, there are these questions or expressions that appear, often dialogues between people, which that can't be worked out philosophically or logically, but they are something that we sit with. Rather than concentrating on the breath, we will focus on a koan. Koans are usually short exhortations from a Zen master to his students, or dialogues between masters, or interactions between master and student. And an example of a koan, and often the first koan a student will work with, is known informally as mu. Case 1 of the Wumen is this koan. It's called Zhao Zhou's dog. Zhao Zhou was a Zen teacher. So a monk asked Zhao Zhou, has the dog Buddha nature or not? Zhao Zhou said, mu. Now, mu is a particle in Japanese that means negative, so does not have. So he's saying a dog doesn't have Buddha nature, but this intellectually makes no sense in the Buddhist schemata of things, because, you know, we've learned that all things by nature are Buddha. So why has he said that a dog doesn't have Buddha nature? So this is the sort of logical conundrum that means that we have to sit with this, because the answer is not something, the response is not something obvious. So we would sit and have that in our minds while we meditate. Other first koans or opening koans include, who is hearing that sound? Or who am I? And once people have shown some evidence of awakening, they may move on to explore other koans. One such koan is, a monk asked, why did Bodhidharma come from the West? The teacher answered, oak tree in the garden. This question, which was put to a great teacher, Zhao Zhou, by a student, is really asking why Buddhism was brought to China. Bodhidharma was the person who brought Chan from China, from India to China. So why did he come from the West? Why did he come from China? was really a question about why, what is this all about? What's the point? What's the benefit? What will we realize? What on earth does this mean? You know, and to have the answer, oak tree in the garden, it doesn't appear to make any sort of sense. And I'm not going to explain it to you because I can't. We can only realize this for ourselves. Explanation is not the way. Yeah. Okay. So what I was going to do now was to, carry on, which is, now I said I'd talk about how Zen practice can help us to take more care of ourselves and to take care of ourselves and other beings who share this planet, both human and non-human. Later on, I shall talk a little bit about my involvement with Extinction Rebellion, in particular with Contemplative Rebels New South Wales. But whether we're involved in activism directly or supporting climate or ecological action from the sidelines or professionally, or just doing what we can to limit our personal carbon footprints or whatever, I suspect that whether we acknowledge it or not, most of us harbour concerns about the unfolding climate and ecological crisis. I'm not sure, there are, I can't see all of you, and I mean, I can see that there's a range of people there, but, you know, I've noticed that when I talk to people my age, myself included, we find that people in our children's age group, who are late Gen X and millennial, seem particularly unwilling to talk about the climate crisis. And maybe because that's the age of active parenting, career focus, and maximum mortgage, rent stress, etc. For many people, it's not that they don't care, but they're trying to avoid thinking about it. Nonetheless, statistics show high and increasing rates of climate anxiety among people, whether they want to talk or do anything about it or not. And we're not necessarily going to talk about it, about the climate now, but we are going to go into breakout rooms to talk about another koan. But first, for those of you who are not familiar with Zen, I would like to tell you about the vows that we generally chant together when we sit together. And the words go, "The many beings are numberless, I vow to save them. Greed, hatred, and ignorance rise endlessly, I vow to abandon them. Dharma gates are countless, I vow to wake to them. Buddha's way is unsurpassed, I vow to embody it fully." And I like you to just notice that we don't say, people are numberless, I vow to save them. It's all beings are numberless. And that includes trees, It's not just things that walk about or swim about. All beings are numberless. The many beings are numberless, and we vow to save them. So basically, Zen practitioners vow to care for all beings, to abandon greed, hatred, and ignorance, and to wake up to where they are and to live an awakened life. At the same time, we can't help but be aware that there are many forces at play in the world that actually encourage greed, hatred, and ignorance. The fossil fuel industry and the military-industrial complex spring to mind. So, how do we deal with this? The concern we have for ourselves, our wish to care for others, and the relentless politico-economic system we are caught up in that seems to be leading to environmental collapse if they continue unabated. So I'm going to give you another koan now. Now I'm going to try and put the PowerPoint up because that's got the koans written in them. So next time I'd like you to look at this one. The others we may get to, but possibly not. One time when the master was washing his bowls, he saw two birds fighting over a frog. A monk who saw this asked, "Why does it come to this?" The master replied, "It is all for your benefit." So if you'd like to just jot that down in case if you think you can't remember it, and then when you go to your breakout room in a second, that's the koan that you'll be looking at. So I'll just go on now to talk a little bit, it's related, about the role of activism, Extinction Rebellion, and contemplative rebels. There's a lot of shouting and debating and arguing about what is happening in the world. We worry about climate and our ecosystem. Everyone has their own theory of how to fix it or not fix it if for them it's not a problem because it's profitable, for example. I read a lot of commentary by people, scientists mainly, whose expertise I trust in all the areas of concern: ecological, meteorological, medical, economic, etc. And many, if not most of them, are actually quite terrified by now. And that scares me. I fear we are damaging the earth and endangering all or most life on this planet. And I hope I'm wrong, but I fear I'm right. And like many of you, I suspect I don't know of any way I can stop it. I mean, I know what action by governments and multinational companies would help, but it seems clear that the most dire warnings of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, do not sway those bodies that could make a difference into urgent action. Before World War II, many people could see it coming from years before: the rise of fascism, the unequal distribution of wealth, and so on. But even those who foresaw it, even if they were powerful, could not stop it. And while some escaped, others were still overtaken by events. For example, Jews escaped to France from Germany, not knowing that it would be invaded, and so fast. In the case of climate and environmental emergency, there is no escape. We may think New Zealand's a good place to go, and lots of the very wealthy are banking on that, with their hideaway bunkers already secured and their private armies arranged. But actually, we have no idea at all how this will play out. In the case of catastrophic climate change, no one really knows. And that's the bad news. The good news is that actually we never know what will happen next. But we do know that people are safer and happier when they work together in community. And that's why people for most of human history always lived together in clans or tribes. And why, in times of catastrophe, those people who have the support of trusted community have networks of cooperation, fare better. Zen is a practice that helps us to be able to let go of our own personal concerns, to awaken to the truth that we are, as Robert Aitkin always said, all in this together. We are because rain is, and sun is, and all our ancestors, right back to single-cell organisms. No, before that even, to stardust. And all earthlings, animate and inanimate, with whom we share this home. We are none of us separate. This has implications for how we live our lives. We can't fix the whole world, but we can look after our little bits of it as best we can. That includes ourselves. Often looking after someone or something is the best way to do that. I remember a friend of mine, she and I were talking about the climate situation, and she worries about her grandchildren and other young children she often fosters. And she said, I can't fix the world, and I worry about how the world will be when they grow up. But at least I can do my best to make sure these children are happy and have a good time right now. And that's always stuck in my mind because it's, you know, sometimes I think that's what people are in fact doing, making sure that they maintain the happiness and support people around them, rather than going around talking about how dreadful things are, if they're worried. So when we look at climate issues, it's easy to get discouraged by the lack of action by governments, by our political parties, by international bodies. It's easy to feel frustrated and even despairing. But there are others who, even while knowing how bad things are, continue to work to save all beings. I was going to, just the other day, I got a random invitation to a book launch at a local bookshop from somebody I'd just met. And I thought, oh, well, I wasn't really interested necessarily in the book launch. I didn't know who the writer was or what the book was, but I wanted to keep in touch with this new person I'd met. So I said I'd go along, and it turned out that the book that was being launched was called Living Democracy by Tom Hollow. And he was being interviewed by Daniel Sellermeyer, who wrote a book called Summertime. I don't know if any of you have read Summertime, but it's an extraordinary account of the fires in 2019 that went tearing through southern New South Wales, where she lived. And it's a very thoughtful and vivid portrayal and discussion of that. And it struck me that, interacting with others locally around community concerns is Sangha. That is the coming together of people to support each other that we aim for in maintaining a Sangha in our group. But it's about local networks, it's about neighbours, it's about people who share similar interests. There's a possibility for all sorts of ways that we can, work with other groups of people, interacting with others locally around community concerns, is Sangha. And Sangha is one of the three treasures of our practice and is traditionally the community of monks. But for us, it's the people we've practiced with and our communities too, our family, friends, neighbours, fellow Australians, and so on. Doing things that brings happiness to others, caring for others, making them laugh, patiently teaching them how to use that app they're struggling with. That's for the young ones among you. Watering them, not trampling on them. Others are not just other people. All these things are our Zen practice. Not because they are good things to do, not because we earn brownie points, but because letting go of a focus on our separate self, because actually it is an illusion, releases us from suffering. Or, to put it more colloquially, doing something helpful for others, especially with others, cheers us up. We need interconnection with people and other beings, and we need to recognize it. But we need the opposite of the polarization we are seeing in the United States, for example, that led to the storming of the Capitol. And that is why I started Contemplative Rebels in Sydney. I mean, somebody had already started a Contemplative Rebels group in Western Australia, where one of the Sangha there had started it, but I wanted to do something in Sydney where I lived, especially during lockdown when I couldn't actually go. I spent 2 years where I couldn't actually travel to WA. So it was an opportunity to get together with other people to encourage action on climate with other people, not necessarily Buddhists, not necessarily other people with a religious perspective of any kind. I mean, if one thinks of Buddhism as religious anyway, but, you know, contemplative covered the whole gamut of people who just had a contemplative, thoughtful, quiet approach to dealing with what we're dealing with at the moment. And so, yeah, we have to connect with everyone and with anyone, not just people like us, however we define people like us. So, and I have got a slide of that, which I might go to in a minute. If I can share screen again, I'll show you. Okay. So this is the page of Contemplative Rebels New South Wales that you'd see if you went to it. It's just Contemplative Rebels New South Wales on Facebook. And yeah. I won't focus on this now because you can easily, I'm going to send you the PowerPoint. All of you will have access to the PowerPoint afterwards, which will give you the koans that we looked at. It will give you the links to anything that I linked to online and so on. Okay, so Einstein said an interesting thing. He said, "The world as we have created it is a process of our thinking. It cannot be changed without changing our thinking." And remember at the beginning, Dogen's instructions for Zazen were to think non-thinking. If we aren't changing our thinking, we aren't practicing Zen. I think it's just about time to finish, so I'm not going to do any of the other koans or show you the tree ordination film, which I was going to show you because it's quite uplifting. So if you want to look at that when I send you the PowerPoint, you can do that in your own time. We can change our thinking when we are not meditating by making choices that align with our commitment to the Bodhisattva way, deliberately fostering cheerfulness, for example. And in this spirit, that's why I was going to end by showing you a little video of monks ordaining trees, but I'll let you do that yourselves. Yeah, that really brings to the end what I was going to say today. So unless there are any burning questions, we, I think, seem to have reached the end point.
End of the time.
Thank you so much for attending.
Thank you, Mari. I have to just, I mean, I know it's bad. My mother's an artist, and a few years ago in Hobart, we created a wedding between trees and people, and I wrote the vows, the wedding vows for the trees. So it's a wonderful thing to do. But yes, look, I'd encourage everyone to keep in contact. And Mari, will you send out your email with the information for everyone to contact you, or you prefer you'll just go through the centre?
My email is actually on the PowerPoint presentation. I designed it as something that I could send out to you. So it's got everything I've referred to and a sort of little reading list at the back. I've referred to some books and they're listed there and things. So I think it should answer all your questions. But if it doesn't, you can email me.
Great. Oh, look, thank you. And thank you, Mari, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Look, we still do ongoing events, so please subscribe to our newsletter at the Contemplative Study Centre to stay informed about this and other upcoming events. But we look forward to seeing you all next time, and thank you again for the wonderful session today, Murray.
Pleasure, Colin. Thank you.
See you later.
Everybody.